Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So the Jewish calendar gives us a certain stability. It provides contours of celebration, but also reflection. And we are only a few days away from Tish'ah B'Av, which is the low point of the year in terms of the mood. We say that the 3 weeks, but especially the 9 days leading up to Tish'ah B'Av, they're tinged with kind of a certain sadness. There's kind of a certain anxiety that hangs in the air. Some people in Israel will tell you that the air feels different during the 9 days before Tish'ah B'Av than the rest of the year. And what I want to do this morning is just take a few moments to share with you a story from the Talmud. Some of you may be familiar with the story, but it always bears further reflection. And it's a story which suggests how our ancestors understood their situation, how they understood their society, how they understood how they faced external threats. And it really is a beautiful story about self-reflection. And I'm going to point out how parts of the story can help us today as a Jewish community to identify the threats that exist within and also the threats that exist without, and how we manage those challenging threats from within and from without. So the story is told about this gentleman who threw a party, and he wanted to invite people to his party. He had a friend by the name of Kamsa and an enemy by the name of Bar Kamsa. And he said to his servant, "Go and invite my friend to the party." As sometimes happens, things get messed up. And the servant mistakenly invited the enemy, Bar Kamsa, to the party. So in walks this gentleman's enemy, sits himself down, and starts to enjoy the food. And the gentleman walks over to him and says, basically, "Who invited you? You are my enemy." And Bar Kamsa said to him, "I understand, but what's done is done. We're surrounded by people here. Please don't embarrass me. I'll pay for my food." And the gentleman says, "Absolutely not. You need to leave." And he says, "I'll pay for half of the feast." The gentleman says, "Absolutely not. You need to leave." He says, "I'll pay for the whole thing. Just don't embarrass me." And the gentleman says to him, "You need to leave," and he escorts him out the door. Now, Bar Kamsa says to himself, not only did he embarrass me, but all of the sages who were sitting there watched it happen, and nobody said a word. And because they didn't say a word, I am going to seek revenge, and I am going to go to the Roman governor, and I am going to, in essence, turn over my people to the Roman leadership. Now, this sounds incredible. Who could believe it? Oh my goodness. But I ask you to think about a time in your life when somebody actively humiliated you, and the incredibly powerful emotion, the resentment, the anger that you can carry with you for a very long time when someone goes out of their way to humiliate you, and when the people that you thought were honorable people sit quietly and don't say a thing. So the first issue that the story brings up is that always in a society, there are forces at work that create anger and resentment and are dangerous. And that we need to be careful, above all, about how we relate to each other, because we think it's just about a party, And really what's happening is that we are sowing seeds of anger that can ultimately be destructive. I have been listening to a very informative podcast. Yossi Klein Halevi, the journalist, is in conversation with Daniel Hartman, the head of the Hartman Institute, and they talk on roughly a weekly basis about what's going on in Israel. And of course, they talk about the horrific dangers from without and about Hamas's barbarity and about Hezbollah's homicidal tendencies and Iran behind the whole thing. But they also said that what doesn't help is all of the animosity that is internal, all of the ways that people within Israel are turning against each other and vilifying each other. So holding out that first piece of how powerful how we treat each other is in terms of how events unfold. So the story goes on. So this Bar Kamsa gets to the Roman governor, and he's very, very smart. And so he says to the Roman governor, the Jewish people have rebelled against you. And the Roman governor says, what do you mean? He says, oh, I'll prove it to you. He said, send back with me an animal for sacrifice, and you'll see they won't sacrifice the animal because they are rebelling against the Roman government. So sure enough, the governor gives him an animal, and Bar Kamsa creates a flaw in the animal which he knows will not be acceptable by the Jewish leadership. So he actually rigs it to make it almost impossible for them to offer this offering. He is really so angry that he is trying to see to the destruction of his own people. And most of the rabbis say, it's okay, we get it. We have to do what the Roman government is asking us to do. But there's one rabbi says, no, we'll give people the wrong idea. They'll think that it's okay to offer such an animal. And this individual is the one who carries the day. As a result of which, they don't offer the animal, the Roman government is angry, and then events start to occur, resulting in the destruction of Jerusalem. And the story concludes because of envanuto shel Rav Akilas, because of, I would say, the weakness, the hyper fragility, the myopia even of this rabbi. Jerusalem was ultimately destroyed. This rabbi could not see beyond the little blemish on the animal. This rabbi didn't understand there was a larger picture at work here. So the second piece, beyond understanding the internal dynamics, is that we have always understood you need to see the larger picture. You need to be able to understand what's going on. Don't get caught up in a little blemish on an animal when Rome is at the gate. Now, there are so many applications to this, but goodness knows it is important to understand right now what some of the larger issues are. There are people who don't appreciate the extent to which Iran is a threat, sending proxies, being destructive in ways that are small and large. And, you know, it was interesting to see that many people of a certain generation finally had their eyes opened to the threat of radical Islam because the singer Taylor Swift had her concert canceled due to a threat by somebody who was radicalized by a radical Islamic group. Some of these people, who knows, may have thought it's not such a big deal, or they may even have been part of demonstrations calling for global intifada, and now it affected them. So it is important to be able to understand the larger picture, to not get so caught up in our own Dalit Amot, in our own myopic surroundings, that we fail to understand the real dangers that exist. So this story, which is an ancient story, demonstrates the incredible self-reflective capacity that our ancestors had. They understood that the animosity that they create from within is going to bubble up and create trouble. And they also understood that you need to have, as I've said many times, Rosh Gadol. You need to have the larger head. You need to be able to understand what's happening. So as we enter into Tisha B'Av, I pray as a community, as a people, and beyond, that we will be able to understand the repercussions of how we treat each other, and that we will also be able to have the larger picture, to be able to understand the genuine dangers that face us from without. Shabbat Shalom.